And now, without any further ado, it is my absolutely great pleasure to introduce the panel, System Disruption, How COVID is Helping to Improve the Local Food System for People, the Land, and the Economy, moderated by Lenore Beyer.
Thank you, Brandon, and welcome to, and thank you for attending the very first session of the Wild Things 2021 conference. I'm Lenore Beyer, Director of Conservation Initiatives at the Kinship Foundation. And this morning I'm going to discuss with an amazing panel how COVID may provide opportunity for innovation and change and how food makes it to your table. And how this change can help both the environment and our communities. For the last year, everyone felt the food disruption in some way. For most of us, it was just about the fact that there was no bread on the shelves in the grocery, or that we wanted contactless food delivery. But for people in disadvantaged communities, it was all about making sure that they could get fresh, healthy food at all, and they were hungry. So this disruption gave the opportunity to local farmers, both urban and rural, who are taking care of the land, taking care of their water, soil, and their natural resources, to help step up and provide healthy food for people and food that's good for both nature and the environment. So before I begin, I do want to make a land acknowledgement. Food Land Opportunity is an initiative based on the goal to create a resilient local food economy. Since all of our work to advance the local food system is connected to our use and stewardship of the land, we offer the following land acknowledgement as an expression of gratitude and appreciation, recognizing the indigenous peoples as traditional stewards of this land. Chicago is part of the traditional homelands of the Council of the Three Fires, the Ojibwe, Ottawa, and Potawatomi. Many other tribes, such as the Miami, Ho-Chunk, Menominee, Sac, and Fox, also call this area home. The area is also a site of trade, gathering, and healing for many other Native nations throughout time immemorial. Thank you. Now I'd like to introduce the panelists. Each play multiple roles in the food system and all have great care and affection for the earth and conserving its resources. I will let each of them introduce themselves and share a bit about their experience in the food system, their mission of their organization or their farm, and tell their story and the part they play before we move into a series of questions that I will ask, and then we will also look at the questions that you have posted in the chat. So I'm going to first introduce Dr. Jifunza Wright-Carter from Black Oaks Learning Center in Pembroke. Take it away, Dr. J.
Oh, thank you. Good morning, everyone. I am Dr. Jifunza Wright-Carter, a family physician and an organic farmer. Am I getting feedback? Okay, should I do anything? Is there something I'm not doing?
Lenore, why don't you try muting yourself? That might be
okay.
The issue.
Okay, let's try it. Okay, wow, and we're not even in the same place. Okay, so I guess I want to just hit on the highlights. My family, we were clear that this time was coming in sense of resource constraints. And so we knew that our community was not ready. And we established the not-for-profit organization, Black Oaks Center, so that we can better support our community in getting through a time like now. And it has 4 skills building tracks, but the track that has been able to take off has been the sustainable agriculture track that is dedicated to facilitating local food system infrastructure. And as we began the process of attempting to, gather the collaborations and what was on the field, we learned that here in Pembroke, which is or was the largest Black farming community north of the Mason-Dixon line, they had actually created local food system infrastructure that spanned all the way to Maywood. And we learned all of this just from elders as we were, in our journey going into the capillaries of communities. 80 and 90-year-olds would tell us about this Black agricultural hub that existed over 60 years ago. And so it was very clear to us that we needed to be able to address both food access and food insecurity in the region, particularly from the west to the south side of Chicago, all the way down into the Southland and the southeast suburbs, as well as here in Pembroke. And so our goal is local food system development, urban, suburban, and rural. And this pandemic challenged every bit of it. As everybody knows, you have a romantic start. Oh, we're going to do this great, wonderful thing, and we're going to restore the food system. And yeah, you meet challenges. But now I think for many of us at community-based level, it's, my God, we need to scale up. My God, we're at this ecological point where we've done all that we can do. How can we all really create an ecological system that will allow us to address the needs of more? Because as Lenore said, there's many a challenged person around getting access to food, even those who are working, still not enough or barely enough. And so I'm looking forward to sharing with everyone and seeing how we can figure this out. We've gone through feats. I think all of us have been required to give our best and our all, but we're at another precipice. And so I look forward to seeing how we're all going to work together to get more done and feed more people.
Thank you, Dr. J. We'll look forward to hearing more as we move through the session. Next, I want to bring in Viviana Okakpu, who will talk about her work at both the Advocates for Urban Agriculture and Cooperation Operation, a community garden and farm that's on a former Superfund site.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm wearing a couple hats today, but I am Viviana Okakpu. I'm the Programs Director with Advocates for Urban Agriculture. We're an organization that's been around since 2002. And it's a coalition of urban farms, community, and school gardens, as well as individuals and businesses that are working to support our local agriculture system and expand sustainable agriculture in the Chicago region. We're able to do this through a couple of different ways. We provide education and training, mainly peer-to-peer education. We also endorse good practices, so something that's become pretty important. I mean, it's always been important, but even more important now in the local food movement is making sure that people have safe food practices. So that's something that we help to spread information about and educate people in. We also exist as a space to connect growers, brand new to experience, and then also just some skill sharing space as well through a variety of different programs that we offer. And we also exist to advocate for better urban agriculture policies, not only in Chicago, but also in the surrounding regions as well. And this is, in the past year, has really come to a head around water access in particular. And yeah, there's plenty more to talk about just on that piece alone. I encourage you to check out, if you're unfamiliar with AUA, to check out our website, auachicago.org. We're also on Instagram and Twitter at AUA-Chi. And you're also welcome to reach out to me at Viviana at auachicago.org. And through, yeah, and I'll talk more about how we've been, responding during the pandemic through supporting the urban agriculture community in our region. The other hat I'm wearing today is with the Cooperation Operation. We're located in the far south side of Chicago. We are currently operating a community garden on a former Superfund site that has now become parkland. We have been operating for the last 8 years as a community garden, and in this coming year, we're going to be expanding to not only offer community garden space, but also more larger row cropping space for beginning urban farmers, just because we have the space and there's definitely a need for the food. So we're excited to be able to offer that and build out a little bit of our infrastructure to really hone in on just how much food that we can produce within a neighborhood. Really just looking to support hyperlocal food sovereignty as much as possible. And if you're curious about our work in Pullman, you can always reach out to us at cooperationoperation@gmail.com or support us through PayPal at cooperationoperationdonation@gmail.com. And yeah.
Thanks, Viviana. I am going to ask you more about that water issue, so
Okay.
be ready. So next I want to bring in Erin Meyer from Basil's Harvest, and she's worked a lot on regenerative agriculture. She also brings great experience as being around health, as being a dietitian. Hi, Erin.
Hi, Lenore. Thank you. Hello, everybody. My name is Erin Meyer, and I am a dietitian and a chef with a background in sustainable food systems. And I'm thrilled to be here. And Basil's Harvest is a nonprofit that is a new nonprofit, but has been in the works for many years as I look at my 30 years of experience in bringing that full circle to Basil's Harvest. And that includes my work in the hospital as a certified diabetes educator, really seeing the impact of food and what that can do. As a chef entrepreneur who started working and contracting with regional farms in 2000, which was a long time ago, but to create and procure foodstuffs that were connected to my family's Italian and German culture, and the nonprofit leadership by working with an organization where we were creating programming for experiential sustainable food systems training for chefs and bakers. And we were also creating experiential programming around the grain value supply chain. So looking at through all those lenses, the one piece that was always missing for me when I got to the farm, working in the dirt with all of these professionals, was the healthcare piece. And I firmly believed early on that we had to connect health and health professionals to this web of farmers and the food that we eat. There was an intersect, and that's really what brought Basil's Harvest to light. And our purpose is to exist to engage the power of regional regenerative food systems for human and ecological health and well-being for all by harnessing the might of environmental nutrition. And if on my slide it describes what I define environmental nutrition as, and environmental nutrition starts in the soil and it moves through the entire value supply chain, how we farm, how that food is processed, and when it gets to your plate, how we're choosing to eat it, whether it's a whole food or an ultra processed food. And those impacts have created a lot of the scenarios that we're seeing today. And through those scenarios where we work and the interventions that we're working or participating in, one is we're empowering leaders through experiential learning. Right now, we're doing that through a culinary medicine program where we are working with the medical school in Peoria, Illinois, with a hospital in Peoria, Illinois, and we are teaching hands-on culinary medicine. It started in a culinary school, now it's on Zoom. So in addition to the passion that we have at Basil's Harvest, we're also learning through this time of COVID of how to pivot and to continue our work, just like everybody here on this panel and those of you that are watching. The other piece of the work that we're doing is building regenerative value chains, and that's a huge long-term goal. It's a collaborative goal. Our work that we're doing, we're piloting a program with 2 farms, a mill, and a hospital to understand and learn how we can look at the soil and do that soil testing to learn what's there, and how the farmers can work and improve based on what their goals and plans are, all the way through this value supply chain of getting oats into a hospital system and on the trays to serve patients. We're doing that with Healthcare Without Harm. And we're also taking that lens and collaborating with folks in the Chicagoland region with the Good Food Purchasing Policy. And there's some work that's happening in there. And so all of this work takes collaboration and multiple hands in the fire. And so that's a little bit of background of what we're doing and who we are. And then telling the stories along the way so we can highlight all these important people and pathways and the things that we're learning, the successes and the failures. And we've seen that through COVID also. So I look forward to talking about that.
Thanks, Erin. I'm definitely going to use that environmental nutrition definition going forward. So next I'm bringing in my friend Cliff McConville. Cliff's farm is out in the mild stomping grounds in between McHenry County. And I must say he has the best Thanksgiving turkeys, early plug. So Cliff's going to talk and share right now about what he's been doing.
Thanks, Lenore. So a little bit about our story. I worked in downtown Chicago in an office, like lots of folks, for many years, and I started becoming, I guess, aware of the problems of the food that we were eating in the food system probably about 12 years ago, and had watched Food Inc. and read Omnivore's Dilemma and started thinking, wow, this isn't right. And at the time, we had about 8 acres of land behind our house. And so we started raising some of our own food, started with chickens, and we had an organic garden. I bought my first cows, four cows back in 2011, and decided to raise a little bit of beef for myself and my neighbors. And that's kind of the way we got into farming. Pretty quickly, we realized that we could, raise our own food in a humane manner, and also do better by the environment, especially with grass-based farming, so mostly on pasture. And so the little business we started in 2012 started scaling up, and we needed more land. And so I started looking around, and I saw that there was in Kane County, and there was forest preserve land near us. It was traditionally farmed, corn and soybeans, and the Kane County Forest Preserve was just leasing that land out. And I thought, well, I wonder if they'd let me lease that land and put it into perennial organic pasture and graze cows there and chickens and pigs. And that land actually, it's 700 acres. It's on the Fox River. So all of that chemicals they were putting on that conventional farmland was going right into the river. And I thought we could do better than that. So long story short, we ended up leasing that land in 2015 and opened a little store there in 2016, and the farm has continued to grow. And so, it's been a great experience for us. A lot of ups and downs and challenges along the way, but we've been successful in growing the business. And I would say that when COVID hit last year, it was really a shock. We had kind of planned our year out in terms of what we could produce. And every year we have to plan very far in advance for beef production in particular. It takes us 2.5 years to raise a beef animal to slaughter weight. But when we got hit with the demand and long lines, and we were able to scale up a little bit, but it was certainly an eye opener for us about the importance of local food. And lots of the other farmers that I know, also we're seeing that same demand hit. So our challenge has been really, can we continue to grow the farm? We were fortunate this year that we have secured another 400 acres of organic pasture land that we're going to be managing this year. So we're excited about that and being able to feed our community with good, healthy, regeneratively grown food and onto the future. Brandon, could you, so I put some pictures in. There we go. I know people always like to see pictures and not words, but that's some of the pictures from our farm. And we do have a farm store at our location in Dundee, and you can see the line of folks there when it was nice and sunny and warm outside, which we're looking forward to soon. But you can learn more about our farm at allgrassfarms.com.
Thanks, Cliff. We'll talk some more about your business model as well. Next, I wanted to introduce Jacob Marty from Green Fire Farm in southern Wisconsin. And he's a farmer as well. And I know Brandon gets his chickens from him because he delivers them all the way into Andersonville in Chicago. So Jacob has a great story too. So I'll pass it away. Thanks, Jacob.
Thank you. Well, good morning, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. So again, my name is Jacob Marty. I started my farm, Green Fire Farm, in 2015 after I came back from getting a college degree to my family farm. So my family farm growing up here was a conventional row crop and dairy. So a very typical Wisconsin type of farm. My dad has lived here his entire life and was the 5th generation, now I'm the 6th generation to live on and steward this land. And I started Green Fire Farm mainly because of conservation values. I went to UW-Stevens Point for a degree in wildlife ecology and conservation. And when I was there, I learned about how to provide habitat for endangered species, improve habitat on public lands, but there was never any talk about agricultural lands, really. And that really spoke to me, so I started doing my own research and realized that there was this developing way of, people have been doing it for a really long time, but it was starting to really catch on in a lot of parts of the United States and the world of turning conventional row crop and agricultural lands back into perennial-based, pasture-based systems where you rotationally graze livestock and incorporate more soil building and conservation type practices while also producing lots of food and some of the highest quality, healthiest foods that you can do. So I was pretty captivated by it, and I came back, talked to my dad, and for now, this will be our 7th season coming up, and it's been a journey of incorporating these new practices and really change it. Like, I kind of joke around that it's the farm beforehand was like the Titanic, and it was having to turn that while I was going to this new course, this new way, this new destination has been a learning experience. And I guess I was asked to be on this panel to kind of share my experiences with how COVID has affected us, and I'll be excited to kind of share more details about that. But there was a interesting contrast and dichotomy between the more conventional ways, which my dad is still operating on our farm. He still raises conventional feedlot, grain-fed beef, and compared to where I'm raising pasture-based, seasonal, very seasonal type of practices of raising animals out on pasture, rotationally grazing them, concentrating production during those summer months when the grass is lush and available, and then tuning down production in the winter and kind of taking a break. The contrast between the opportunities and challenges that we both experienced because of COVID. So one of those was like a lot of the food system with grocery stores. There was supply shock there, and a lot of people were flooding towards the more local and smaller type of farms that were direct marketing, more available online, or doing like farmers markets, that type of stuff. While my dad, who was more stuck in a commodity type of scale, he didn't have access to even take animals to where he needed them to get taken, so it was backed up. And he had a lot less flexibility. We had more flexibility, and for once, it was almost like the settings, or I guess the circumstances of the food system, which is totally in favor of the status quo, the conventional system, was not an advantage, but actually a barrier for most of these farmers and my local community to accessing what they needed to do. And for my farm and my business, which was starting to grow, it was almost like a turbo or like a bonus that just propelled us into the next level where we wanted to be, almost a little bit too quick and having growing pains with that. But COVID was quite a bit of a learning experience, and in good ways and bad ways. But I think we're for the healthier, and it kind of put things in perspective going forward of what we need to work on. So I'll leave it at that and look forward to contributing on this panel. So thank you.
Background on myself as well. I am, as I mentioned at the beginning, I'm Lenore Beyer. I'm Director of Conservation Initiatives at the Kinship Foundation. Brandon, you want to put up my slide? And I manage our Foodland Opportunity Program, which is an initiative, a collaboration between Kinship Foundation and the Chicago Community Trust, and it is funded by the Searle Funds at the Chicago Community Trust. It's a multi-year initiative, and we're trying to create a resilient local food economy that protects and conserves natural resources while also providing community wealth. Secondly, I work, next slide, on the Chicago Region Food System Fund, which was a COVID relief fund. Basically, a number of funders came together to recognize that there were huge impacts to the food system, and that we needed to infuse funding in a variety of different ways and be flexible within that. And so this is a collaborative fund that's over $7 million that has reached out to a number of different communities addressing both hunger and food system resiliency. So through philanthropy, I'm trying to see how we can support the local food system in weathering the storm and also coming out on the other side stronger. So with that, let's start talking in more detail about the challenges and impacts from COVID. So people needed fresh food, especially in areas that were disproportionately impacted by COVID and the health crisis. For the most part, that was in food scarce communities, and in the Chicago region, that was in Black and Brown communities. So I'd like to pull Viviana in to really talk about urban agriculture farms and community gardens and how they responded to that challenge.
Hello. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, you know, through my work with Advocates for Urban Agriculture, I really got a chance to see the scope of the ways that people were responding to the COVID crisis. And what's particularly interesting about urban agriculture is a lot of people, I would say the majority, certainly in Chicago from my experience, get involved with growing food because they see, issues of food justice in their own communities or in their neighborhoods, right? So people really were primed and ready to respond. And it has consistently throughout this whole pandemic been a source of hope for me, just seeing the ways that people have responded, honestly. The ways that people pivoted to find those new markets in short order, to collaborate with other growers and really work together rather than to be in competition in a lot of cases too. So seeing more combined CSAs, seeing people collaborate on delivery and refrigeration, really being able to identify some of the best outlets for food, whether it's going to new customers who are looking to buy more local food because of the disruptions that they experienced in the food supply chain, or also those doing direct delivery of meal services that are culturally relevant, to making sure that food is all fresh food, not just shelf stable food, is also going to pantries and for more local distribution. So I saw urban farmers all around the region really stepping up in this way to be able to support all of those different initiatives and to make sure that people still had access. And it was exciting to see because it ended up being like similar to what Jacob was talking about. It ended up being a pretty good boom for a lot of small business owners to really get out there and increase their reach, and the people who, I think increasingly are valuing local food more and more, right? It's ever more present in people's minds, and really just recognizing the power that's there. It's really not so much, it's nothing new. It really isn't anything new. It's really just a return to what our ancestors were doing. And what we already saw in Chicago too. It used to be one of the highest concentrations of victory gardens, back during World Wars. So it really isn't anything new. I think it's just a lot of adaptation that's happening for the current context, right? And we saw that happening in community gardens as well. More people, as people were out of work and needing more outside time, people were really interested in supporting community gardens and being able to spend time and learning how to grow their own food. And suddenly all the seeds are gone from all shelves and all stores. And so you really saw that happening in the community garden arena as well. And what's interesting there is that, it's a community garden. So people already have really strong relationships with people in their neighborhood more often than not. And so those sort of avenues and pathways for local distribution were already there. And I think that was something that really was to the benefit of being able to feed folks more locally. And at the same time, the community level response has been another one of those pieces that continues to give me hope. Just seeing the level of mutual aid that people are engaging in, and really just recognizing that we're the ones we are the ones who can help each other out and really save each other through this, especially at the beginning there when we didn't know what to do yet, right? And have since come up with so many different solutions and adapted to the new technology that's available. So really just encouraged to see the way that it's up, and also been inspired by local growers. And so I feel like the number of people who are interested in having their own food business or having their own food operation or just growing in their backyard has increased multiple fold, and really just kind of heightened the importance of local food in folks' minds on a much wider scale than we've seen for a couple decades. So that's been exciting to see, and just the ways that not only as a means of having local food distributed and really, having more people invested in that, recognizing the importance of our soil, our water, our air quality, and at the same time becoming new avenues to be able to employ people, and people seeing that as a real viable option as well. So, and then not only just directly in growing, but also distribution, and because there's been so much home delivery now too. All those different pieces coming together has been fascinating, interesting, inspiring to watch develop over the last year or so.
Yeah, I've been really interested to see how people who are providing for the emergency food system, and to see whether that can be a market in the future in some way that is also, that people are getting. The growers are getting compensated for that food as well and provided as a market. I would like to pull Erin back in to talk a little bit too about how she's seen the changes in the market through COVID.
Thanks, Lenore. Ooh, is that me? Brandon? Okay, I think it's better. I was going to say something, respond to something that Viviana had shared, and as I was thinking about, the COVID response, and CIFPAC in Chicago had created the emergency response, and the number of organizations and people and businesses that flocked, it literally just flocked to these calls, wanting to understand and learn how they could help or what was needed. And the collaboration that occurred during that time was very powerful to me. And in addition to that, what was really nice and again, powerful, I think is the right word to see, is how it continues. And Viviana had mentioned cold storage, and, from all the different groups that were developed through the emergency response, there's a business group, and really taking questions or needs and trying to figure out, how to move things forward, or how, what should it look like, the availability, how do we create something from nothing, in the work that people have done. It just, I don't know what the right word is, but I was amazed, and just the gratitude for everybody, and everybody just jumped in, I guess. So I wanted to mention that. From the COVID impact on the work that Basil's Harvest was doing, I mentioned earlier the pilot project, and this pilot project was a 2-year initiative and I mentioned the goal is to get oats into a hospital system. And when COVID hit, if we start with the processing piece of the value supply chain, the mill, which was Janie's mill, their primary business was wholesale, and that pretty much stopped. And their retail direct-to-consumer business, they were just starting to work on it. They maybe had 10 orders of coming in a week for flour. So it was, they'd either call in, or I think they were starting to get their website developed. And within, I want to say 3 days, it went from 10 orders a week to 500 orders a day. And I'll talk about that in just a minute. From our project perspective, our project stopped immediately, and it should have stopped immediately. And so the mill, their focus was just trying to keep their heads above water. They had started developing the computer process of ordering. They had started thinking about, what needed to be in place to start ramping up this direct-to-consumer method of business. And that was one thing that really, really helped them. The other piece of this is they went from, I think, 6 full-time employees to 23 full-time employees within a very short time period. So not only were they trying to fill orders, but they were also trying to onboard people. And if you think about that process, this is an industrial process, right? I mean, just everything, the safety from the employees to the food safety, everything that needed to be put into place, and in order just to create these systems to function. And they did it. And in the backstory and in the background with the mill piece and the work that we were doing with the mill, it stopped. But we saw, looking at what was happening, potential needs. So, their retail business just skyrocketed. In our mind, the question was, how do you keep a percentage of this business once sales start to decrease because more flour is getting on shelves? Because if you remember, there was no flour on the shelves. That's what started part of this initiative. And so we were working in the background, creating a scope of work to say, from communications and marketing, things that when you have time to breathe, to take into consideration, so you can start building that out for the next phase, so that you can potentially harness and keep, a percentage of these clients. And so that, in all honesty, is just kind of sitting off to the side, because at that time it was survival. There is no time to look at a scope of work and say, oh yeah, we can do that now. It truly was survival. So that was on the mill side. On the hospital side, their job is to care for patients. And so, the whole initiative stopped. And so we responded with, how can we support you as a hospital, as an institution? And there wasn't a lot that we could do from the outside, but thankfully, the number of COVID patients that they thought that would come through their doors didn't happen. So their hospital beds were empty, and the employees that were still working because they went through a furlough process, we were able to put together a couple work plans to help us with this initiative. And part of that included we needed to design how we were going to test the oats. And there were employees that were able to help us do that. We needed to design, a system where these oats are more expensive compared to what they're currently purchasing. So we had to walk through that and say, okay, they're more expensive. What do we need to do here? And we created a waste reduction program so that whatever is cooked will be used. And we've created ways to do that. So we went through that development and testing. So we were actually working on the backside of all this and in the periphery, trying to organize and set up processes to help us because we knew things would open up again. So from a market perspective and from a food system flow perspective, there was still some work that could be done and that we were able to support.
Thanks, Erin. I think the fact that you used hospital employees who weren't actually, I guess we assumed that everybody was very busy during that time, but could adjust and still use their expertise in order to create.
And I think it's important to say that the hospital that we're working with, they're in central Illinois. It's more of a rural location. And if we think about when the pandemic hit, it really hit urban centers. So Chicago area hospitals were completely full. The hospital in Peoria was ready to go. They were trained. They had everything in place to go, but the number of cases were slower to ramp up in those rural areas. So that's what allowed us to continue this work. It wasn't we can do this or we can do that. It was, okay, right now it works. It may not work tomorrow. If that makes sense.
So I'm going to pull the farmers in again in a minute, but before we do, Viviana, the first people are asking you to speak up a little bit, so do that. Also looking for some specific examples of the things you're talking about. So I think, perhaps talking about the food delivery and who stepped up around the USDA boxes, if you want to talk a little bit about that.
Sure. Yeah, no, we saw a couple of different actors in Chicago working around these USDA boxes and being able to pull those together. Certainly saw that very active on all the CIFTAC communications and everybody meeting on those platforms. I know Gorilla really stepped in to try and sort that out for our region once they were granted that. But more on a local basis too, I saw some really incredible operations like Fresher Together, like at the Tumbo Farms, like some other community gardens as well that have been involved that paired with local chefs to create, not to bring food from their farms as well as aggregate from other locations as well. And then turn that into food farm familias, which are culturally appropriate relevant meals that were then delivered to households for folks who had requested it, right? So that sort of combination of getting farms to provide their foods, working with local chefs, and then working with other people within their neighborhoods to be able to do distribution, then also identify who would like to receive those meals. Like that's just that one example, right? Hopefully you can hear me as I'm saying all this. Got a little closer to the computer so you can hear me. But that's one example of people just really stepping up and using their own networks that they already had to, and who are also probably the most appropriate folks to be meeting the immediate needs of the people in their immediate surroundings, right? So really incorporating sovereignty in a couple of different ways that was exciting to see happening.
Thanks. I'm going to let you guys have a break, and I'm going to bring both Cliff and Jacob back in to talk a little bit about how they saw their business models change. Jacob, you first.
Sure. So a little bit of background. Like I said, last year was my 6th season coming back. So the first couple of years was really incorporating new animals into the farm and slowly growing stuff. And last year was the 3rd year that I was doing farmers markets in the Chicago area. So I did like the Andersonville market every single week on Wednesdays, and then on Saturdays I would alternate between Oak Park and Evanston. And I was slowly just growing. On our farm, it's my dad, myself, and then my partner, and maybe some seasonal help every once in a while. So it's a small team so far, growing out. So we're a little limited at the time, but I was slowly starting to grow, and I was having trouble matching up demand and supply. And going into last year, I was actually trying to focus on raising more volume to try to meet restaurant and try to diversify my revenue streams and be a little bit more resilient and not so reliant on retail. And it kind of was funny how it worked out, because obviously restaurants really struggled because they were having to close down. People weren't going out in public to eat so much. So I had a kind of a glut of a few select products that I was building up supply over the winter, trying to have enough to be able to take on a couple of accounts. And I was able to then use that extra supply to meet some of my demand for this influx of customers. So we almost last year tripled the amount of customer accounts on our website. Now, not all of them are active and purchasing every week, but it took 2 years of our website with pretty minimum marketing to reach about 500 accounts, and it took about 2 months after that to double. And so there's just this giant influx that we were able to try to reach and try to feed. We had to limit how many eggs we had. People could buy at certain parts of the, especially at the beginning. And certain items with just the nature of how we raise animals. I don't start getting chicks and start calving and stuff like that until the spring. Most of our production, again, is concentrated in the summer. So I'm nimble, but I'm not very quick to be able to just scale up and have a bunch of new supply. Like Cliff mentioned before, we're looking at 1 to 2 year production time spans of predicting stuff. And that's if all the conditions are right about being able to have enough infrastructure on the farm, which we can manage a little bit, but getting processing production with butcher facilities. Right now, that's been as long as I've been back in the farm doing retail direct marketing, it's been a problem for like the last 5 years. And I'm sure it's gone even further back than that. And this crisis really has just exaggerated that issue even more, where before maybe you had to plan out 6 to 12 months and you might get lucky. Now we're looking at 18 to 24 months production plans. So it's so hard to try to predict what you're going to be able to do, work with your butchers to be able to have that availability, that type of stuff. So, but with how I guess that was just the initial influx of demand, kind of that initial panic. And it did kind of cool down a little bit after that, but our sales stayed steady after that. And we had really good sales, I guess, performance over the entire season. Farmers markets, once they kind of got in the swing of things, got their system set up for how to social distance and regulate how many people. We had our best year when it came to farmers markets. It seemed like local communities really stepped up and tried to have access to to support that local food system. And I think, at least from what we've realized or what we heard from our customers, was that they want to have that connection with farmers. And we've always had that desire, but when it comes to the food system showing a little bit of stress fractures happening, it really started to show, like, people really took that seriously and started thinking, maybe I need to have a local farm be my primary source of food, at least for what they can provide, and then the grocery store can be more of a backup. And I think I've heard that resonate with other farmers in the area. Local CSA vegetable farms in our area over the last 5 years were dwindling in subscription numbers, and then lots of them were sold out. Had to do extensions and expansions and sold out of those, and they had to cut it off. So there's just a supply and demand just imbalance. But that was kind of our experience with it, and it was pretty tough trying to handle that as a small team and still trying to get things up to speed with that. And we've been, for the last 8 months, pretty much certain products we've just been like, okay, we got some pigs going to the butcher, get those up on the website, and it just gets scooped up right away. And we're not going to have chicken again until next summer when we can start getting them back out on pasture. So it's just kind of been talking to our customers and saying, this is what we got. At this scale, this is what we can do. Sorry, we can't provide all of our products year round at this point. But so can you eat chicken right now and then in 3 months switch more to have a beef dominant diet for your meat? So that type of stuff. But luckily for us, I feel like all of our customers they are very understanding and work very patient and work with us. So.
Yeah, Cliff, why don't you weigh in on your experience relative to, I know you have a farm store, so it's a little
Sure. Well, of course, as soon as probably the day after they announced the stay-at-home order, I guess, we really weren't sure what to expect. But wow, we started getting hit with long lines. Now, you've been in our store; it's pretty small, and so we had to limit the number of people to do for the social distancing. And of course, so there was like 4 people in the store at a time. So we ended up having just lines of people standing outside all day long. We could never get through the line, which was kind of crazy. And again, as Jacob mentioned, we plan our production out typically a year in advance. And so, we quickly realized we had to start limiting stuff just so that we could have product for our regular customers. So we started limiting people to buying like 4 pounds of ground beef and 3 dozen eggs and, milk. We've usually haven't had to limit. We do sell out of milk a lot, but we had to limit milk. So that was kind of a challenge, telling people they can only buy a certain number of items. And of course, as Jacob mentioned, the processing slots. We were fortunate we were able to get a few extra processing slots over the summer for beef, and so we were able to increase our beef production some, and then chickens. We created a few extra batches of our pasture-raised chickens. So we do batches of 500, and I think we got maybe 2 or 3 extra batches that we were able to get on the pasture this summer. But it was definitely busy. We had to hire more people. We had to have 2 people in the store, pretty much every day, which we never had before. We used to be able to get by with 1. And then we put on hold. We had plans to start doing local shipping, shipping of our product, which we've never done before. But we realized we just didn't have enough inventory that we could do that and keep the store stocked. And so, we put hold. Maybe one of these days we'll get to that, but right now we just want to make sure we have enough inventory to keep the store going. So it did present some challenges for sure, but we did the best we could to navigate that. And our hope is that a lot of these new customers that we got for the first time last year, will start becoming regular repeat customers. So that's kind of the big question going into this year is, do we expect to grow more this year, or do we think that a lot of those people go back to the grocery store and stop coming to the farm? So, that's been one of our challenges in planning for this year.
So to that thought, because I want to come back to that, how we can change the food system, really grab the people that we've all introduced to in the last year. I'm going to try to see if Dr. J is available to come back in. She is.
Lenore, I think Dr. J is having some technical difficulty that we're trying to get solved. Okay. Oh, nope. Here she is. We can bring her in.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Okay. Yeah, I apologize. Problems.
Okay. Cliff, if you want to mute, that might help a little bit. So, Dr. J, I just wanted talk to you a little bit about, how you saw the crisis hit the neighborhoods. We talked about people being hungry, and I know you were providing food from your own farm and from other farms out to the neighborhoods, and how you feel like that hit, and what you think we can do in the future in terms of supporting the local system.
Well, as I listen to Jacob and Cliff and others, it's just very clear to me the dichotomy of the experience. Communities that are under-resourced, versus communities that are 5 and 6 generation farms and lands and assets and skills and experience. And so it's been very clear that in a number of places, there are the resources and the skill set and the capacity to feed local food to the periphery, to that particular town, village, or even city. I think the greatest frightening thing for me has been the reality of being under-resourced, under-skilled, and limited capacity, and all these hungry people, all these people who really are not able to get adequate amounts of food. And the reality, as Jacob and Cliff were saying, myself as a farmer, there's limits to what it is that you can yield, and personally. And so I think that the key thing for me is, how can we work together? And I'm going to keep saying it, because if Illinois is going to feed Illinois, if Midwest is going to feed the Midwest, yes, we'll have our shining stars, our Jacobs and our Cliffs and our community gardens, but some kind of way we've got to get it to the point where, even all of the farms around them are doing something similar, or a core of them are doing something similar. And, our socially disadvantaged farmers that are under-resourced are able to get the support that they need to do this mission. And that's feeding our local folks. So that part was very real for me. And then we still struggle with that challenge. I've had a number of patients end up in the emergency room, in the ICU, not from COVID, but from eating all of this processed food that's being flooded into our community, loaded with sodium, and they have no business with it, but that's what's in abundance. And so, unfortunately, with us being under-resourced and having less supports and skill sets and capacity, we have to take whatever we can get. And that's not helping people get well. And so, unfortunately, yes, in the acute phase, we rounded together 13 community health centers. And from the west side of Chicago, blocks together after the riots, on down through the Southland, on into Pembroke, we weekly distributed hundreds of boxes. And for the first time for many families, they were having fresh fruits and vegetables for the very first time in their life, even before they, had money, but they were able to go to a fast food restaurant or someplace where they were getting less nutritious foods. And so when we attempted to switch over and begin to feature our local food on trolley, at different trolley stops in high need communities, people still were not able to pay, even though our food was at a much lower price. And so what we've resorted to at this point is that we have what we call RX prescription bags that we're able to promise at least 15 servings for $7.50. And people have been able to make donations so that they can help to support the community in getting fresh fruits and vegetables. And we also have some dry goods in there as well. So I'm looking very forward to having the conversation around equity. That's been the other disruption in this pandemic. I call the virus the crown virus because it's acting like royalty and just making us change our lives altogether and come up with policies that never go through the Senate or the Congress. It's like doing its own thing. And so I just think that for the first time in my life, and I'm 63, you know, there's never been this opportunity before where human beings are really looking at, okay, who am I and who have I been? And even my ancestors, who have they been to contribute to the outcomes of what we have now? And how can we change them? And so that's been our challenge, you know, everyone who's growing, everyone who has any capacity around local food system development from within our community has been pretty much maxed out based on, you know, what resources they have. And I just feel like it's time for us to all figure out how we can work together to really feed the state of Illinois and the Midwest region.
Thanks, Dr. J. I think you've hit on a lot of really important points here, and looking at an equitable model for how we really make sure that everyone has access to fresh, healthy, local food. We have had a couple of questions that go toward supply, what the supply is and whether we can feed, how many people we can feed. And I don't know who wants to try to answer that one. That's a hard one. I can do a little bit of that, but I'm gonna see if one of you guys want to answer that, or should I pull in someone else?
I guess I could speak to it if Cliff has some numbers or someone else has more numbers, but I have seen, I don't have the numbers handy with me right now about like what fraction of the total food demand. And again, the way that we measure food, like Dr. J has kind of mentioned, is there's junk food that really isn't nurturing and feeding. It may get people by, but it's not really creating healthy, nutritious diets compared to like the food that we really want to produce and feed people with. I've seen a lot of positive resentment about this, or sentiment about this, that we can feed our local communities, and especially like a large urban area like Chicago might not have as much. It has such a concentration of people, but there's so much land around it too, and with incorporating the local urban agriculture food production systems, we could meet this demand. To give a little background, like I live in Greene County, just south of Madison. Our county has 36,000 people roughly. And as far as I know, like the amount of farms that, let's just say our farm is about 400 acres, and that sounds really large, and it is. It's a lot of land for a family to manage. We are small compared to some of the other farms in this area that are row crop and just gigantic. And in a way, like I'm kind of competing with them or trying to like survive compared to them, jacking up land prices, rent prices, and destroying just like the butchering and the support type of facilities. But in my county, there's less than a dozen farms of any scale, like 50 acres plus, doing livestock, which is a pretty typical like pasture-based livestock farm. So there's so much, like we are less than a fraction of a % of the total land in our county, and we're just within 2.5 hours of Chicago. It's not going to happen overnight. It's not going to happen over a couple of years. It's going to take decades to really get this up and going. But with the amount of information, how fast it can transfer with just demand and also practices, there's so much opportunity here to grow, and it compounds. So I feel confident that this is a worthwhile pursuit, but it's not a given for sure. I would say Dr. J said that this COVID has been kind of a wake-up call and has kind of shown things that we need to work towards. But at the same time, the way that, in my opinion, like the USDA reacted to this, they did help farms like us. You know who they helped the most, though, was large corporation farms. Our neighbors that had like bumper crop years for grains and had the highest prices in the markets they had in the last 5 years also got relief and got way more relief than a farm like us that we also had a bumper crop year, but that was more for just demand. I lost ground to all my neighbors that have been competing for the local land to rent. So it has opened things up, but the people that have a lot of power and have they got out even further ahead and are pulling away. So we do need to work on it a lot.
Thanks for saying that, Jacob. I think that's a really important point. And Cliff, you want to speak to this as well? Talk a little bit about land.
Sure. Yeah, I think, well, one of the question about what could we, the data I've seen in Lenore, I know you probably look at this more often as well, it was that Illinois only produces 10% of the food that our population of Illinois consumes. The other 9% we bring in from other states or even other countries. And, I think that is just that number has drastically been reduced over the years as, we've gotten into this, what I'm going to say is big food, big ag environment. And most of the land around here, anybody that drives outside of Chicago sees corn and soybeans. Most of the corn and soybeans, of course, go to feed livestock or ethanol. And then that stuff is turned into highly processed foods and shows up as junk food on our store shelves. So it's not that we don't have the land. I think back to Dr. J's, we really need to take the land that's here and use it differently to grow food and not fuel and livestock feed. And then we need to train people to grow things. I feel that I know a lot of farmers that were growing vegetables or doing small livestock farming, and they have not been able to continue doing that over the last 10 years because they can't make a living at it. So that's a systemic issue. We need to change the system so that people that want to grow food and know how to grow food can continue to do it. And we need to teach young people how to grow food. So I think, that's, we have a lot of apprentices that we try to train on our farms. Some of them are able to go on and open their own farms, but it's really the system is not set up to support small farms right now. And that's, the big thing that we need to change, if we're going to really make a dent in it.
Yeah, absolutely. A viability of farm and having people make a living wage, whether they work on the farm or own the farm, is really important. I'm going to ask Viviana to come back in and talk a little bit about how urban agriculture is part of this puzzle. Someone has to leave now.
Hello. Yeah, that's definitely something that a question that sparked my interest, and I've heard the numbers as low as 4% of what's grown in Illinois is actually edible for humans. So it's interesting because in Chicago there's an ever-growing number of people who are really dedicated to food justice, to being able to grow our own food, to be able to continue to build out our local food economy. But there's no land, right? And definitely within an urban context, there's buildings that could be hosting vertical farming spaces if you want to do indoor agriculture, but they're so capital intensive that it's not anybody who can enter into that kind of a market. Same goes for just being able to afford land in the vicinity of Chicago. So really figuring out that piece, recognizing that, of that 90+% of the farmland that's in production in Illinois right now, all of that is highly subsidized commodity crops, and those subsidies, like urban farmers don't see any kind of subsidies, right? Certainly in the sort of ways that that Jacob was talking about, in the ways that the USDA was supporting other commodity farmers in the region. So yeah, just thinking about that, there's definitely a lot of people who are primed and ready to continue building our local food system, but it's really a matter of being able to have access to capital, to be able to access land, to be able to continue building out this local network of mutually supportive businesses like meatpacking plants, like refrigeration, etc. So that's all there, but it's really just a matter of thinking about, on a policy level, how do we prioritize where money is spent and where it goes, certainly in the farm bill, but down to even municipal policies of how we're using land that or working with land that isn't currently active for any particular purpose, and really starting to value that a little bit more within our local governments, recognizing that this is a trend that isn't going anywhere, and relocalizing our food system is essential. Yeah.
Thanks, Viviana. There is a question here about that says there's hundreds of city-owned parcels of land that could be used for urban farming. Do you want to clarify how that is an assumption, but it doesn't necessarily play out exactly like that? It's not that easy.
Yeah. Yes, there are a number of city-owned parcels that could be used for this purpose right at this very moment, if it was possible, right? I think one of the largest issues, like, of past administrations has just been focused on different types of development, or viewing urban agriculture as temporary, as a placeholder for further development. I think a major piece of that is also zoning and zoning issues, really recognizing that, and some of the communities that have been hardest hit by COVID also have a lot of open land due to other, neglect that has taken place over the years. Food apartheid didn't happen on its own. It's been very, very intentionally enacted. And, a lot of times, for zoning, when it comes to zoning, where urban agriculture is not allowed in residential zones currently, which is where a lot of the land is available, where it could be is immediately impactful to be able to feed neighborhoods in their immediate vicinity. Other land that is available, for example, different types of manufacturing land, is highly contaminated. So having to go through a process of remediation, and one that is acceptable by the EPA. There's definitely been some advances in the past year towards what is an acceptable level of remediation by the Illinois EPA for a food production site. Meaning, rather than having to, extract huge amounts of soil and clean it and then replace it, instead being able to use different barrier methods and then building the soil on top of that, which would also potentially help with some of our flooding issues that are continuing and will only increase. So yes, there is a lot of land that could potentially go to this use, but it kind of gets gummed up in the works of being able to navigate the city of Chicago, and being able to have the right sort of legal support to be able to navigate that system. And then be able to make sure that the soil is safe to even be around for, most people are growing in raised beds, but even for the growers themselves, that we're the ones who have that kind of regular exposure to potentially lead-laden soil, that could then affect us, right? So it's just so many different layers there, but there's definitely a want and an interest to be able to open up more, city-owned parcels, publicly owned parcels within Chicago and the surrounding areas in Cook County. But there's just a lot of red tape to get through at this point. And I think people are much even more motivated right now to make sure that we can start cutting through that and making sure that growers have access to the basic things that they need, like land and water, to be able to grow food in the first place.
Thanks, Viviana. I love the urban farms that I visited and had a chance to talk to the farmers and really understand the work, but it's a lot of work and it's very difficult. And as Dr. J is saying too, there's an opportunity out in the rural areas and figuring out where people want to live, what they want to do, and all the distribution challenges around those things are really important too. I want to bring Erin back in to talk a little bit about grain farming because we also have opportunities to see how land can be converted from conventional grain into growing organic or grain that people eat as opposed to cows eating it, and also how that is potentially land protection. We've talked about livestock grazing and grain, and then we've talked vegetables mostly on small plots, but livestock and grain provide the opportunity for larger expanses of land to be used for this. So Erin, you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I would love to. I wanted to just read something to start this out. As I was looking through the notes and what we were talking about, thinking about land protection or stemming land loss. And one of the things that I came across, just an overall view of organic farms that tend to have better soil quality and reduce soil erosion compared to the conventional counterparts. Organic agriculture generally creates less soil and water pollution and lower greenhouse gas emissions and is more energy efficient. It also is associated with greater biodiversity of plants, animals, insects, and microbes, as well as a genetic diversity. And when we look at grain farming specifically, I'm coming at this through the lens of not a farmer, and thinking about, the benefits and the values of the farmers that we're working with who are grain farmers for human consumption. And the one area that I am really interested in, and as we talk with farmers, is this soil health impact to the final product of the grain or the seed that's coming off of there, and what does that look like from a nutritional value. And when we think about grain farming and we think about organic or regenerative systems, one of the practices themselves to help promote and to move towards the most nutritious crop as possible includes rotations. And those rotations, what they are, how they impact the soil and the nutrients that they provide back into the soil to be used by the next crop. But the other piece of organic grain farming that I've learned a lot about is that next crop, can it be harvested for income? So when we think about grain farming, organic farming, regenerative farming, the work that has to be done is more labor intensive, but we also have to be thinking of not only the environmental impact and the social impact, but also the economic impact. We're saving dollars from the input costs, but we also need to think, if we're putting on a crop like oats or wheat as a cover crop, which is benefiting the soil, what are they going to be used for? And so if we can turn that into a crop that can be sold, then that's also increasing the value and the opportunities for the farmer. Another item that the work that we're doing that it's really opened up my eyes in a lot of ways is that we were on a tract of land last August to do soil sampling. And within this tract of land, it was divided into 3 sections. In the 3 sections, we had soybeans. In one plot, we had corn in another plot, and then the third plot was fallow, and it was a combination of clover and something else, and I don't remember what it was mixed with. But within that, and thinking about the way that the farmer was farming, what was underneath the soybean crop was rye. They had taken rye it was the previous crop on that land, and instead of tilling it in, they crimped it so it became a barrier to promote that soy to come up and to really flourish. That was something, as you think about the system as a whole with organic farming, with organic grain farming, the benefits of the previous crop, what are those and what are different ways that they can be utilized? And a lot of this is experimentation. That's one thing that I've also learned throughout the last couple of years working with different farmers is that they're trying to improve every day. They're trying to, add biodiversity to their land. That third crop that was fallow, the diversity that brought in from insects and other bugs was amazing to me. We were standing in the field, and I was covered with, insects, positive, beneficial insects. They were just flying all around us, and you could hear it. And the ecosystem that's creating from, an organic regenerative grain perspective, it opened my eyes to many things. And so, I think I've rambled my way through this. I apologize for that. But there's just so much, and I'm visualizing that field and the impacts that happened. And we had our soil researcher come in last week, and he met with the farmers and myself, and he went through the data to see, the way that these farmers are farming, where are we starting? And number one, from a yield perspective, the yields in the tracts that we studied were so much higher than the average on the farm. And the farmer could attribute it to some of the practices that they were doing to those plots. That was so exciting to me. And what it told from the research is that the organic matter, which is a huge component of organic farming, that organic matter was building and was creating, the symbiosis in the soil, below the soil, above the soil, this whole system. It's a lot of work, but I was in awe of how the work translated into scientific data and confirmed for the farmers what they were doing right now, the things that were working and the things that weren't working that they needed to go back and have a discussion about. So it was really eye-opening to me.
Thanks, Erin. I appreciate that because I think some of us do sit here and are watching this, not being the farmers, and trying to understand what's happening in the ground, how it's impacting the food, the yield, as well as the nature around us. So we're coming up on the end of our session, but I want to give each presenter a chance to say a few, we only have a couple minutes, so a few short last words. I will, we'll make sure to give you everybody opportunities to purchase products from these local farms. That's the best thing that you can do right now to support the local food economy. But I'm gonna let Cliff go first because I know he's on his way to the airport very soon. Cliff, are you here?
I'm waiting for Cliff to queue up, so maybe we go to somebody else first. Okay.
Erin, you're still on, so do you want to give your last word?
Yeah, I would. From a Basil's Harvest point of view, as a chef, dietitian, food system program, the connection between healthy soils, plants, animals, people, and planet is not mere rhetoric, but an evolutionary truth. The work that we're doing, what I would ask of you and the audience is, as we work through this food system and the value chain within institutions, if you are a person that works within an institution, is interested in this, I would love to hear from you and to talk to you. That's part of the work that we're doing this year, is to learn more from the people that are on the ground doing this work.
Thanks. Viviana, do you want to give your last words?
Sure. You know, it should be obvious to support your local farmers, right? But absolutely that, and don't snooze on urban farmers too. There are plenty of people doing really amazing work right now, right in neighborhoods, who are directly addressing the issues of food apartheid compounded with the impact of COVID. You know, I think it's just really important throughout all of this and throughout everything that's going on to just trust Black, Indigenous, people of color, farmers, and their foodways. They've survived, and we have survived much more than a pandemic in this modern age. So that's first and foremost. But I think that also includes acknowledging, you know, the amount of land in the region that is not under food production and the power that exists in that alone. So just really be thinking about that, and not only for the urban farmers who are growing in the city right now, but also in supporting them where they're starting off, but also where they want to go, right? And see this transformation over time. So yeah, I'm just grateful to be able to do this work and to support other growers as well in my work. And really, if you're curious about urban agriculture and supporting growers in this region, do check out AUA, see what we have going on, and if you happen to be in Pullman, come visit us at Coop-Op, because we've got some interesting things going on our site as well, to see that transformation from toxic land to be able to produce food as well. So thank you to everybody who shared this space with me.
Thanks, Viviana. I'm going to pull Cliff in now, I think.
Okay, I made it. Sorry for some technical issues there, but yeah, just to reinforce that, there are farmers, local farms like ours out there, and everybody should be able to find one either at a farmer's market or, there's some resources online. Eat Wild is one that we have a lot of farms like ours that are listed on eatwild.com. But I also think we need to work on systemic change, which is the Farm Bill, and lobbying your legislators to support organic, local, regional farming and beginning farmers in the Farm Bill, because that's really the change. We need to get more farmers started and get access to land, and I think that's the important thing that we can all do, is work on our legislators. We can't have all that money going to the big corporate farms and the international meat companies, which is unfortunately what happens now.
Thanks, Cliff. Thanks for your time. Dr. J, you want to give your final words? You're on mute.
Dr. J, you'll need to take yourself off mute down at the bottom of the screen.
You had superpower. We are at a unprecedented point where we, the small people, the little people with small farms, whether they're 400 acres or 4 acres, have a wonderful opportunity to band together and, as someone's saying in the chat, create alternative systems. And so I'm looking forward to working with many of you to literally get healthy, affordable food to the people who need it most. I am putting up our Healthy Food Hub website. So I hope to hear from some of you, and I'm looking forward to continuing to build local food system infrastructure. I'm convinced that, we create this, we solve the people's problems. I'm sure as the 80-year-old couple came to us with $4, giving us thanks for bringing them healthy, affordable foods during the worst of the pandemic, those kind of people will stay loyal and they're going to want to be fed by local people who care. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. J. I'm giving the last word to Jacob, and I think he's going to tell us where the Green Fire Farm story originated.
Sure. Yeah, I can't really add too much. Everyone else covered a lot of things about how you can support, policy and supporting farmers directly. And when this is all over, COVID, have people over, share local food with them, provide a meal. Part of this is having a culture that values food and puts that at the top of our priority list. So sharing that and developing community that way, have potlucks, that type of stuff. I think we have a great opportunity, and we all miss other people and social lives, to be able to use that spark and this kind of this wave that's going to happen afterwards to capitalize on that. But Brandon and Lenore asked me to talk about the name of my farm, Greenfire Farm, because a lot of people here might be familiar with El Leopold. So my family, actually, my great uncle was a local conservationist, forester, cheesemaker, and he did a lot of things for conservation. He actually had the privilege of knowing El Leopold pretty closely. And so I didn't really know that at the time until after the fact, but I read his book, Sand County Almanac, and in that he has this essay, To Think Like a Mountain, about where, when he was about my age, a younger, mid-20s, he was working in the Southwest United States on a nature preserve or a park. And he was out one day and he saw a pack of wolves, and he was a big hunter. So he shot and killed one of the wolves, and he went down to see it, and it was still alive when he approached it. And he saw this green fire go out in its eyes. And at this point, it was like this just turning point in his life of realizing that his previous notions that was better for the land and better for him, that the wolf didn't agree with that, but also the mountain, the land didn't agree with that. And that wolves have a really important part of having a healthy, dynamic ecosystem and community. And so that story resonated with me, and my family, my dad, about 8 years ago had a barn fire. And at the time, I was not interested in farming. Actually, if you had told me that I was going to be farming in like 5 years, I would have kind of cried or laughed, because that was not in my future. And this barn fire happened. I came back, and after the barn was gone, saw my dad, who doesn't show much emotions, very stoic person, had a look in his eye. And I realized then that there was something important to having a legacy, and that food and farming is so central to what we're doing. And so that's why I came up with this Greenfire Farm name. And I hope that, in my community, that I can be a leader and support other farms taking on these types of practices and open up access and feed more people, because our food system, it has a lot of room for improvement, and all the people in here, I think you're at the forefront of this, and have a lot of say and can improve things. So don't underestimate your own power.
Thank you so much, Jacob, and thank you to all of our panelists. I think this has been a rich conversation. I had a bunch more questions, and I know we didn't get to everything in the chat. We will be available, and I think Brandon has put most of our websites and things like that in the chat, but we look forward to continuing this conversation in many different venues going forward. So thanks for a while. Thanks for having us.